I'm about to show you top 10 features you're going to need a good procurement software. Chances are you might be in a situation where this conversation comes up because I have been in the last few years. I've sat through multiple evaluations where companies are comparing procurement software over 50 plus features, which they're never going to use. And they'll end up maybe selecting a tool over like sign a 3-year contract and then it still doesn't do the job. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through top 10 features that you need in any procurement software for it to be a good choice and get the value, whether it is getting more visibility into your spend or closing books faster. Let's get into it. The first feature you need in a procurement software is purchase requisition to purchase order flow. So having the ability to have a centralized purchase request process so all your employees can put purchase requests and you have better visibility. Without that, you're going to have two problems. Number one is finance is the last to know about all those purchases because the first time you come to know about a purchase is when you actually see the invoice. So you want to make sure you have an upfront purchasing process. A lot of tools you might be looking at call it spend management, but essentially it doesn't look very closely into the purchase request process. They might be more focused on just approving the request for, oh, we already spent the money, so we just need to kind of rubber stamp it. That is not purchase request process. Feature number two is the ability to have the accounting codes in the system. So what I mean by accounting codes is when you actually think about where the transaction or where this whole thing is going to land up is in your books, right? You need to book the cost or the expense. Now, your purchasing system or procurement system should have the ability for a requester to select the right set of accounting codes, whether it is as basic as selecting a chart of account, or maybe you are a project-based organization where you're running projects for your customers. That means you need to select the right project so you can bill the customer accordingly. Or if you're using dimensions like Sage and Tech provides, or locations, departments, you name it. So two things. One is it should be able to pull all the information and keep it in sync with your accounting system so that right set of fields can be picked up during the purchasing process. And number two is you got to have a process so that it automatically gets assigned. So your users are not spending time trying to figure out or scratching their head and say, what GL code I need to pick up? So those are kind of two main things in here. Feature number three is approval workflow or configurable approval workflows. So when you think about a request being put in, that is just somebody saying, hey, I need this. But there needs to be somebody in the system or in the process who says, why do you need it? That is the approval process is designed for. Now, you might have different names for it. You might call it delegation of authority or approval levels, whatever that might be. Typically, what we see is most companies need these few basic approval workflows. One is based on amount. Hey, if it is less than 250, we don't need any approval. But between 250 and 1000, it needs to go to department manager for approval. Above 1000, it needs to go to a VP. Above that, it needs to go to CFO. Now I'm using this as an example. These levels are going to vary based on how small or big the organization is, right? So if you're a small organization, you can use these levels. But if you're spending millions of dollars every year, your limits are going to be very high. The second is within this, you need the ability to route it based on some sort of category. Hey, it's an IT purchase, IT needs to look at it. It's a marketing purchase, marketing needs to look into it. Those are the basics on the approval workflow. All right, so the fourth feature now is proactive budget controls, which means making sure that a spending is being checked against a budget and you only move forward if you have the money to move forward, right? It's that simple as that. Now, there are many systems out there which call themselves as budget control, but essentially what they're doing is they're matching the existing transactions against a budget, which means they're basically telling you how much money did you spend in that budget. That gives you the reporting that you need. What it does not do is proactively control spending. What it does not do is stop somebody from moving forward if there is no budget. So what you need here is a proactive budget control. So it just checks all upfront, and if there is no money, guess what? You cannot move forward. And what is equally important is to tie it to your source of budget. Whether you're using a third-party financial tool or financial system for forecasting the budgets, or it's in your ERP, either way, it needs to be made available in your purchasing system. Now let's talk about how do you make sure that your procurement system is used by employees. So there are two features I'm going to talk about. Feature number 5 is punch outs or vendor catalogs or catalog punch outs, whatever you want to call it. The bigger challenge here is you could design this process in a form as well, right? You can use Google Forms or any sort of, Microsoft Forms for that. Problem with any sort of form is somebody got to fill it in, right? Copy the description from Amazon website, put in the price and so on. That creates friction. Friction drives lower adoption. So what you need to do is make sure you reduce that friction. And the easiest way to do that is using vendor punch-out catalogs. The way a vendor punch-out catalog works is an employee can click on a logo, let's say Amazon. It takes them to the vendor website. They pick what they want to buy, and it automatically copies the data back. And that's all they need to do. Everything else behind the scene in terms of placing the order, routing it for approval, all that is managed by the system. So now it's just very easy for employees to jump in and buy what they need to buy. So they're not circumventing the process or finding, kind of shadow processes to manage all that, right? So that's vendor punch outs. Number 6 is mobile approvals. We all get a lot of emails, right? So if all you did was find something where send them an email, send them a Slack message, send them a team message, it's just going to sit there because there is so much noise coming in. So easiest way in our experience is have a mobile app, which allows employees to approve from anywhere. So if I'm on the road, or maybe I'm in construction, I'm always on the project site and so on, I can approve it right from there, right? These two features, punch outs and mobile approval, goes a long way in terms of reducing that friction and improving your adoption of the new system. Now, real quick, if all these things of our interest to you and you want to see how exactly this will work with your current environment, click on the link below to schedule time with one of our team members. We'll kind of exactly walk you through how to set up a purchase request process, set up approvals, set up vendor punch outs, mobile approvals, and all that. All right, let's get back to the video now. Now let's talk about the AP side, accounts payable. So now what features AP team needs, right? So the feature number 7 is the ability to do OCR. So here's the problem. If you automate your purchasing upfront, but your AP team has to actually go and do all the invoice processing manually, like take an invoice, download it from an email, chase somebody for approval, then upload that into the accounting system, you don't have a process that scales, which means you have another constraint or bottleneck now in the process. The way to solve that is automate the invoice capture and OCR process. So here's what I mean. So imagine you have a centralized AP inbox where every invoice comes in. The system actually reads that inbox, pulls the actual invoice copy, run it through a combination of OCR and AI to figure out what is in the document and actually create the invoice for your team. So that means your team is actually not spending time trying to figure out what's in the document and entering it in the system. So it leads to faster invoice processing. It leads to having a centralized place for invoice capture, and it leads to less errors because your team, if they're entering hundreds of invoices, the chances are they might, get something wrong while entering. The next feature that you now need is, now you have an invoice in the system. Now we need to make sure that the invoice can be paid. The way to handle that is to automate what's called invoice matching process. So invoice matching at a fundamental level, what you're basically doing is, if you receive an invoice from a vendor, you want to make sure it's for the right price that we agreed to pay and whether we received the product or service. Like, those are kind of the two main things, unless it's like utilities or legal fees and so on, which is a totally different bucket. So when the invoice comes in, you need a process where invoice can be matched to a purchase order and receipt, which is called three-way match, or the invoice is matched to a PO to figure that out. Okay, is this invoice ready to pay or is there a problem? Maybe you order something for $100 and the vendor sent you an invoice for $200 as an example. And if that doesn't match, that's called an exception review, which means somebody needs to now jump in and review what happened here. Ideally, the way this process works is you have a automated process to match invoices. It runs through maybe two-way or three-way match. Two-way means matching the PO and invoice. Three-way is PO, invoice, and receipt. And then it tries to figure out, is there an exception? What we recommend as a process is, if there is no exception, you can just automatically send that invoice to your accounting system. There is no further work required. However, if there is an exception, you route it to the right person to review it. For example, if there's a price exception, AP has no clue why the price is different, right? You just know that the price is different. You can then route it to the right person to review, whether it is the original requester, or if you have a procurement team, it goes to the procurement team to review, right? So those are some of the things you can do with powerful matching. And when you're looking at matching, look for tools that can match at a line level, not at a PO level. There are many tools in the market which says, we'll match an invoice with the PO. All they're doing is they're matching the amount. What you need is, at each each line level, you want to see total aggregate quantity, the unit price exception, total amount, things like that. All right, so let's talk about now the final two features. Feature number 9 is you need integration with your accounting system. Whether you're using QuickBooks, Xero, Sage Intacct, Microsoft, those are different systems that might be in your environment. So what you need is a real-time integration in two ways. Number one is it is pulling all the data that it needs in the accounting system. So remember we talked about GL codes and supplier lists and all that. It has to come from your accounting system, right? So in terms of the information like, GL classes, locations, it should automatically pull. And there should be a design or a system in place to keep it in sync so they don't go out of sync over a period of time. The second is to push the invoice or the purchase order to the accounting system. And you want to do it automatically. So as soon as an invoice is ready to pay, it should automatically show up in your accounting system. It solves the two problems, right? Number one is you don't have to create unnecessary accruals, right? Because otherwise, if the system doesn't integrate and the invoice is sitting here, you got to accrue for that. It's a nightmare. The second is you want all the information going there, right? So it's just not the invoice document itself, but also the actual attachment of the document, like actual invoice. So you do not have to come back to the other system to kind of look at it always, right? So if I'm in my accounting system, I should be able to see the complete record of here's the invoice, here's the attachment, here's the approval it kind of went through. So if an auditor is looking into your accounting system, they can exactly see how this invoice was created. Feature number 10 is more focused on how the vendor is actually handling the implementation. So are they able to implement in a 2 to 4 weeks timeline? If you are a mid-market company, let's say you have 500 to 1,000 employees, yeah, you can have like maybe 2-3 months of implementation cycle because your process is very different. However, if you are a growing company, you have just, let's say 500 employees, you need something that you can implement tomorrow. And second is you don't have to set up your own resources separately for that. So if the vendor is able to complete like a 2 to 3 weeks, that's kind of ideal. But more importantly is how much of the work they are going to do, how much of that work is automated. You want to make sure that your team is not spending a lot of time in that implementation, implementing the system, but rather they should be spending time in validating what is implemented. With that said, if you want a procurement software that handle all these 10 features along with automated invoice capture, processing, and AI to automate the end-to-end procure-to-pay process, click on the link below to schedule some time with one of our product specialists. On the call, we'll go through your current purchasing and AP process and kind of figure out how we can optimize it like end-to-end using a procurement tool, automating the requisitions, approvals, invoice matching, and integration with your accounting system. Again, click on the link below to schedule some time with one of our product specialists. And if you want to see exactly how ProcureDesk compares with Procurify and Bill.com, check this video.